Hello, I'm Guy, and this is Guy Robot. Hello! So, this week I'm doing my video from somewhere slightly different. I'm on a beach in the middle of Costa Rica. And that's what brings me to this video. Software development is awesome. Now, I know that one of my largest viewed videos from last year is software development is, well, the exact opposite of awful. I talked about how bad it was, I talked about the meetings, I talked about the software stacks, I talked about everything that makes software development as a career suck. And I stand by it all. But I got a lot of flack from people on that video for being entitled, for having made money, and the fact that I had something better than a lot of other people had and I didn't appreciate it. And although I did say some of the virtues of software development in the last video, I don't think I really got to go through them properly. And so I'm going to flip my last video on its head. All of that's still true. Software development sucks, but it's also awesome. And here's why. So first off, let's be honest. The money is good. I'm sat here on a beach in Costa Rica over the summer. This is paid for thanks to all the work I've done with software development over the years. Even if you're a graduate, you're coming out of university or you're looking for a first job after doing some basic code academy and having got a bit of your own experience. In the UK, you can easily guarantee a job in the mid-20,000s, which is above a lot of starting salaries. And to be honest, you can expect a salary in the mid-30,000s in the UK just as a starting salary, which puts you on the average UK salary for an entire life of experience, and you're there straight at the age of 20-something. Personally, I set up my own business when I came out of university, ran that for 2 years, and I went on to a job 10 years ago now at £40,000 a year. Within 4 years, I was up to about £150,000 to £200,000 a year from my experience in software development. If you're good with this, you can scale it very, very quickly. As I said in the last video, there's a lot of software developers that aren't good. Now that means that although you have to work with them, if you're one of the good software developers and you absolutely love this, you can carve a niche out for yourself and earn a lot of money relatively easily. Better than that, you can do it anywhere in the world. I hire freelancers to work with me on projects sometimes, and they're scattered all over the world, in India, in Eastern Europe, in America, in Southern America. I find whoever's best for a particular job and get them to work for me. And the day rates are pretty much the same wherever you are. So if you're living in London working as a software developer, although you can earn a lot of money and six-figure salaries, you can potentially be even better off in some of the other more remote parts of the world. There's also how varied the path of being a software developer is. A lot of software devs end up going down what's now called the full stack web developer route, where they do some front-end development and a bit of API development and a bit of back-end development. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But there's so many more options than that. You've also got the option to be just focused on back-end, high scalability, network-based systems. You could become a games developer. You could become someone who focuses solely on high thread concurrency network systems. You could do embedded systems. I know people who specialize their entire careers working on gambling machines. Pretty much, you name it, you can find some way to carve your niche out for you, from nuclear missiles to websites. Now, the challenges you're going to face on a day-to-day basis are going to be pretty similar between them all. But you can do it. You've also got the flexibility to move between stuff, particularly if you can see how a technology you've used in one area helps you move on to another, or you can spend that time doing it yourself. I've had the luxury of moving between everything from desktop development, back-end development, Linux, Windows, driver development, you name it. Over the years, I've probably worked on it, apart from defense, not interested in that, at some point in my life. And that's the wonderful thing. As long as you can segue correctly between stuff, you can find a way to do it. And it's not just the technologies and the end product that you're creating, it's the actual role that you're going to have in doing it. So you might want to stay as a software developer and just do that. You might want to eventually move into a team leadership role. You might want to move into more of an architect role. I ended up in a lot of hybrid roles where I'd come in, I'd lead a team technically, but take on none of the personnel management ones. So I could set a technical vision, I could deal with the architecture, I could still remain doing development 3 days a week, and I could help spearhead the overall strategy of a company and team without having to worry about performance reviews, salary reviews, and all of the other rubbish that comes with that. If you find something you want, you can probably carve out a niche for it, and the better you get at it, the more you'll be hired for doing that role when you've got the proof for it. And you can always start from somewhere. The paths are hugely varied in software development, and that actually gives you quite an interesting career compared to just sitting doing the same thing and pretty much getting paid a bit more year after year for 40 years. Now I know I had a bit of a go at software stacks and all the different things that come along in the last video. and I stand by that. I still think that too much time is taken up on a day-to-day basis worrying about the different technology stacks you've got. But the flip side of this is actually there's a never-ending ability of the amount of stuff to learn. If the web had stopped developing back in the early mid-90s when I originally started developing it, we had kind of JavaScript version 1 and HTML4 had just come out, then I think my current job, which involves some web development work, would be a heck of a lot more difficult and less fun than it is at the moment. It's also been great to learn new technologies. When you're having to chase them on a day-to-day basis, it can be frustrating. But you don't have to do that all the time. And you have the option of choosing to go and learn something yourself. I've recently started learning to do some Unity development. I have no intention of being a games developer. It's one of the most boring things out there to me. But I've been meaning to do it for a while. So I got a basic game together just to practice doing it over a few days. I'm going to file that away, never use it again, but it's fun to have done it and had the experience. And that's something that is awesome about software. You have an unending opportunity to learn new areas because as quick as you're learning it, your knowledge is outdated and you're going to need to learn new stuff. You've got to be cool with that being your career path, but as somebody that likes to learn, that does suit me well. And because there's so much to learn, it's continuous. This isn't the kind of thing that you just learn sitting at school or college or university, come out with a certification and that's it. The whole of the software development career path is definitely going to be self-taught. At the age of 18, I'd already been working before going to university doing software development. For me, it started buying books at my local bookshop before the internet was a thing, learning how to do some software development, and in the early days of the internet, uploading some free open source projects and getting offered some work from there. If you want to go down the university route, you can. I went to university, to be honest, mainly so I could drink and have fun for 3 years. But I know people who went to university and cut their teeth doing initial programming there. You can come into it anyway. You can go through a formal route, like going to university. You can go through a semi-formal route, like some kind of code camp or online teaching and course structure, or you can just teach yourself everything. There's a guy who I met and worked with a few years ago, and we are pretty much parity, I would say, for software development skills and also for the salary levels that we can command. The difference is that he started on a slightly lower amount than me, but didn't go to university. So he didn't have to pay off the university debt in the first place. But by the time we were 25 years old, we were both sitting parity together. You can get jobs without as much experience. You might not get as much money to start with on your first job, but you can move jobs really easily in IT. So you can teach yourself anywhere in the world and you don't have to worry about spending tens of thousands of pounds or dollars on trying to get a university education. It can help in certain areas. There are aspects and times where I wish I'd done different bits in my career. I wish I'd focused slightly more on some of the advanced mathematics when I was younger. It would have made some things easier later on. But you don't know where your career is going to take you. So a lot of the time, you don't need the formal education. It can be fun though, and I've enjoyed aspects of it. And as I just touched on, one of the wonderful things about software development is that it's in demand. So you can move. The longest I've ever lasted any role was a contract role, and that was 3 years. The longest I lasted as a permanent employee of another company was 18 months and 1 day. After that, my next longest role was 11 months, and following that, my next longest role as a permanent employee was 11 weeks and 1 day. Suffice to say, I've enjoyed moving around, and I've found that if a role hasn't been right for me, I've had the ability to go, this isn't working. I've tried all different roles and I've been able to find where fits me and what works best. The wonderful thing about software is if you've got a good reason to move jobs, it is in such demand globally. There are just not enough software developers that if you're a compelling candidate and you've done really well, then even if a recruiter has doubts as to why you left your last job, you'll probably still get it if you're the best candidate for the job. I've hired people on that basis and I've been hired on that basis before. So if you're good enough, you'll probably get a job. And even if not, the average IT career in one job is probably only about 2 years now in the UK. So you can still move around easily all the time. So the other thing it gives you is freedom. I'm sat here on a beach in Costa Rica. As you saw on the last video, I took my computer monitor, my keyboard, my mouse, and a bunch of technical stuff with me. I'm doing the same at Christmas. I'm going away to Tenerife for a month, and I'm spending Christmas away from the dark, dreary days. As long as I've got an internet connection, I'm good. I have 6 megabit a second here. I have 2 megabit a second in the last place, but you know what? I can work on that, even if it's a darn sight slower than I've got at home. And that's the amazing thing about being a software development. So many people count themselves as digital nomads working somewhere. Now for you, it might just be doing some web development or agency work for someone else, or you might even want to work doing full stack complex projects, but you can do them anywhere in the world. It's not always easy to get a remote working job, but they are there and you can make money from them. I think for the most part, it's often easier to make money contracting in whatever country you live in for a very large multinational, but some of the more interesting jobs let you work remotely. The business that I'm setting up at the moment and we're recruiting for, we're actually hiring everyone to work remotely. We don't want an office. We want every single person to be able to work wherever they're comfortable in the world, and we think this gets the most out of them. And I think more and more companies are coming around to see that. So certainly working in software development and all the various aspects of it gives you a degree of freedom that you just don't have in some other career paths. For me, actually the freedom is more important than the money or anything else. I like the fact that I can choose my working hours. So at the moment I'm working till about midday, 1 o'clock. My wife's looking after our daughter in the morning, I'm spending family time together in the afternoon, and then I'm working in the evening, so I still get a working day in. That means I've got 6 weeks where I don't have to be in an office or based somewhere else, and that's something that you just can't do elsewhere. For me, the freedom that I'm able to get from this career path is absolutely priceless. Often that does come with being willing to be self-employed, but if that's something that you're willing to do, and frankly, I don't think it's a problem in software, then go for it, and you're going to have an incredibly rewarding and relaxing career that's based around your life rather than basing your life around your work. And that work-life balance for me has made all the difference for happiness in my life. So there's 2 more things for me that I think are the things that keep me in software development above anything else. There are many things I've considered doing in my life and many different career paths, but there's 2 main things that tie me to software development. The first is the creativity. Now, I always grew up saying I wasn't creative. I was a scientist. Everything was based in science for me. But I realised as the years have gone on what a creative process software development is. There's never a right answer for how to solve a problem, and sometimes it's just the feel you get for a problem. I find that when I'm sat there with a completely new idea and I have to figure out how to build an entire business up, all the technology that goes around it, and how this is going to grow to serve 1 million, 2 million, 10 million users a year, a month, whatever, connecting to it. I start to visualize in my head how all the pieces fit together, how this system's going to look like, what are the 100 different processes and services that are going to chunk together and all the endpoints. And I start to build up this picture in my head, and I can move it around and see how it's going to fit. Now, I have absolutely no ability to visualize imagery in my head. I'm one of those weird people where if you ask me to think of a sunset, I can think of the words a sunset, but I don't get any visual picture in it. The only time that comes close to me for any kind of, I guess, creative visual experience is when thinking about software architecture. And the creativity I get from it is fantastic. I get those moments where I'm having a shower and that's it, a problem solved, and I've just seen how the pieces fit together. I've woken up from sleep and that's it, I've just finished doing the coding for something in my head, and then it's just annoying, it needs to come out my fingers. But there is something cathartic and amazing in that creative process. The more I've built up my experience and the more I've built up the different areas and technologies that I know, the more rewarding that process has come for me. Now, I said in the last video, there's a lot of doing the same. It's CRUD operations. Yeah, there are a lot of CRUD operations on databases, and even worse than that is ORMs, personal dislike. However, once you deal with the fact that you've written those bits, coming up with how you're going to build the system around those CRUD operations, it can be incredibly rewarding. The number 1 rewarding thing for being a software developer, as far as I'm concerned, is that once or twice a year, you get a moment, or at least I get a moment. And that moment tends to be, I solve a problem I've been working on. It was either a complex problem or it's something that I have solved elegantly, or it could just be the amount of code I've churned out in a very short period of time. And there's that feeling as you walk out having done it of, that was amazing. I can normally count maybe 1 a year, but they do happen. I always ask when I'm interviewing people, what is your proudest moment as a software developer? And that's an interesting one, because a lot of people come up with, quite frankly, a bullshit answer at that point. Oh, there was this time when we worked on a project and we all pulled together and it did really well. But then there's also the times that you get someone where they get code and they get software, and the answer you get is different. Now for me, the proudest moment I've ever had was when I was an intern at Hewlett-Packard in the middle of my degree. So I was 21 years old. I got assigned a project to rewrite a piece of software that was already existing. What this bit of software did, in effect, was find all of the tape libraries on a fibre optic SCSI network, and then piece together which drives were in which tape libraries, what the stack was, so that you could in effect map out where all the tape drives and where all the tape changes were on a hardware storage network, and put all of that together in an XML document. What we had, it was basically used for support purposes to gather information so that we could then help support customers. The existing software we had needed prerequisites installed. They had to go on of about 20 megabytes, and then you needed to install the software, which was another 6 megabytes. And all of this was quite a pain in the arse. My challenge was to create something that was self-contained to do the whole lot. I had to learn the SCSI protocol, I had to learn the Windows driver development kit. I also learned how to do it on Linux and SG, and I did my first ever what I would call proper non-Hello World or theoretical C application that would compile for both Windows and Linux. It abstracted the driver layers away, and it went out, scanned the SCSI network, and presented all of the information in an XML file. Now, there was no one in my team or anywhere nearby that could help me with this. I had no information about the Windows driver development kit, and actually some of the things for how to change those SCSI commands were so poorly documented. But what I came up with was a solution that was under 150 kilobytes, required no external dependencies, and worked on both Windows and Linux. It never got used, but it was awesome to do. It was just a really simple, elegant solution. There wasn't a huge amount of code, but the learning, the journey I went on, the fact I was able to accomplish it, and the fact it was done so nicely and so succinctly was really rewarding. Now, there have been many of those moments on different projects, but that was a particular one for me. I love the fact that you can create in software. I love the fact that you can come up with something like that does something really clever. I also love the fact that you can build something real. If you're working with embedded systems, even if you're just playing with a Raspberry Pi or Internet of Things, the fact that there's something real from it is another one of those really rewarding moments for me. I created a whole in-car entertainment system where I had wireless access points in my car. I had a touchscreen I created for music. It was basically to have a full car computer system before Apple AirPlay and stuff came out, using an iPad, a Raspberry Pi and a bunch of wireless networks. Now, that one was actually a huge project. It took me ages to do. But when I drove down the motorway for the first time, or rather when my wife drove down the motorway for the first time while I was trying to get it all set up, and I actually got this set up with an iPad on the dashboard, and it played music and it read it from an SD card when I put it in, and then it played it through the car stereo, and it was a nice touchscreen interface, and all the audio album artwork came down off it. That was a rewarding moment as well. Sometimes it's the scale of the project, sometimes it's the fact it's a physical thing you can hold, sometimes it's the solution you go for and how elegant it is. But I would say maximum once a year there is one of those moments, and whenever I have one of those moments I go, this is what I'm meant to be doing with my life. And so I don't work in London anymore. I do still think that being a software developer for the overwhelming majority of companies sucks. There are a lot of meetings, there's the endless technology stacks, there's not doing very much work, there's code being thrown in the bin and it's the same thing, lather, rinse and repeat again. But that doesn't mean you can't make this an awesome career. I am humbled and grateful every single day at the opportunities that I've had in my life. I started programming when I was 7 years old, and I have written code almost every single day of my life ever since. Before I had my own computer, I used to write code on paper and go and type it in on school on the next day, and that's where I ended up starting growing and learning my code from. This is something I've built up over my whole life. I do think software development sucks, but I also think it is one of the most amazing things, and it allows me to have the life that I have, and I'm very grateful for that. So I wanted to take an opportunity to try and set the record straight and balance out the argument from my last video. Hopefully this has been interesting for some people. If you didn't see my last video, go and watch it now. It was pretty much the opposite of this one, and maybe I was in a slightly more jaded perspective when I wrote it. But my views on both are true. Nothing in this life is black and white. There are pros and cons to it. Make your own decisions up. Personally, for me, this works well. So it's about 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm on Tamarindo Beach in Costa Rica. I'm off to do a bit more work at home now, and then I'm off for a day with my family having fun on the beach. And all of that is thanks to software development. So I will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.